moves us toward land reparation and community control of land has been is being demanded from the people. In so much that comrade Maria talks about it like this, doing the job for elected officials and folks who would do policy work of actually doing deep listening and finding out what we want to have happen and allowing that to be communicated and permeated in our messaging to elected officials, to the world, anybody willing to listen. And what we're sharing today is the culmination of what we learned from a series of community conversations that happened that started in June, and I'll talk about that. But we're gonna, talk about today. This is the public event, the public meeting for that precedes the release of a report that we're calling Community Control of Land, the People's Demand for Land Reparations in Baltimore City, led by Black Youth Institute, of which I am a representative, and please forgive me, I am Brother Eric, Serving Director of Black Youth Institute, and we are co-facilitators with Farm Alliance of Baltimore, and there are several Farm Alliance members, but also and staff members, and the two people who we've been talking for years now about something like this. Maria and I had this crazy idea a couple of years ago of connecting with our community to find out what we would do, and this is the culmination of that. So thank you, Maria. Thank you for, I want to thank Joey is not on here. Joey's an intern that was working with us. I want to thank the facilitators who led the community conversations and folks who were in those community conversations. Those facilitators included Brother Lee Jordan, who's at this point Director of Operations and Culture at BYI, Brother Denzel Mitchell, who serves as Deputy Director at Farm Alliance, Sister Aaliyah Frazier, who is a board member of Farm Alliance of Baltimore, Ms. Rodette Jones, the farm manager at Filbert Street Community Garden, and Sister Siobhan Terrell, the Deputy Director at Black Church Food Security Network. These are the folks that, without their tireless, work in every phase of this process, this wouldn't have happened. So I just want to single folks out, but I thank everybody who were able to join those calls, those who remain committed to this work, even if you couldn't be on these calls, and really excited to share this with y'all. We're just going to, get into it. But I say this, before we get into it, I'll share a quote from Dr. John Henry Clark, which states, my approach to this topic might sometimes sound like a fantasy, but please bear in mind that sometimes the fantasy of today is tomorrow's reality. This is what we're talking about today, tomorrow's reality as the floor being us considering and demanding community control of land in Baltimore City for the purpose of urban agriculture, of expanding opportunities for community members, and particularly for Black people to grow food and fiber and other materials and other food items and flowers as well in our communities in our own terms. We're talking about an extension of sovereignty. And that's why this moment is historic. This is coming from the people, and we hope that, like I said, this is the floor of what we are able to accomplish at the level of policy that includes legislation, but also programs that help to materialize some of the things that you'll hear today. So just keep that in mind, that it might sound lofty and all of that, but just keep in mind that today's fantasy may, and then we intend for it to be tomorrow's reality. So let's talk about the process, how we came to this point. Our hope when Farm Alliance and Black Youth Institute decided to come together was to develop a community-determined proposal and demands, I should say, regarding community control of land with broad-based support among Baltimore City residents and others for the purpose of sharing and shedding light on potential policy that would govern us and get us to a place of some modicum of community control of land. How did that happen? In June 2020, we had a preliminary community dialogue that was co-facilitated by Meyer Strauss and myself. And we talked with community members just to see if folks thought that this would be a good idea. And I want to hang my hat here for a quick second that we didn't just go through a community-based process. It was entrenched in this concept and idea of democratic participation, right? Before we even went through the process, we got folks together. I think it's in the report, so you'll get it tomorrow. But we had something like 60, maybe even more people. I might have that, don't quote me wrong. Quote me, I might have that wrong. But in June 2020, folks got together and said, yeah, we would love to have this dialogue. We would love to do something like this. So let's figure this out. We want community control of land. And then in October, we actually started those community conversations. We did 10 of them. But before that, we had a teach-in where comrades from throughout the country who have been a part of policy and or other practices to get land for agricultural purposes in their cities, like Detroit and Oakland and Philadelphia and DC. They came and they taught us. They gave us some game on, what we could do, what is possible, what they did, and it was a really good and powerful process that was that got us started. And then we had 10 community conversations that were scheduled in the month of October into November. We began compiling community wisdom from those community conversations and finding out what the themes are in all of these conversations, and then put those all together in 3 forms. One is this presentation that we have tonight. Another is a short kind of 1-page summary of the report, and then a full-length report, both of which will be released tomorrow. So for those who are attending here and or on the newsletters for Farm Alliance of Baltimore and for Black Youth Institute will get copies, and then they will be available on our websites, in the future as well. So we will, we'll talk about this in a second, but the idea is to have it in several forms so that we have the ability to communicate with those who are willing to listen, including elected officials, of what our larger community has said we want, and given our wisdom as to how we can accomplish community control of land in the city of Baltimore. So that's been the process, and here we are in this night sharing what we found. So what do we do? We were able to connect with our community as we are member organizations and community grassroots organizations. We were able to tap into our networks. And in tapping into our networks, we were able to connect through our newsletters and listservs, social media, word of mouth, emails to get people out to these meetings. And in all of those efforts, we were able to, through these 11 different convenings, we're able to talk to actually over 100 people, but in the actual conversations that you will hear where the demands came from, there were about, I think 40, I can't remember the numbers right now. I think it's about 42 people that we engaged through those 10 community conversations. So one of the folks who came in this and who came through these conversations said that the people that are most affected by the decisions around land ownership should be able to make those decisions, and the people who experience the most consequence or benefit or impact from resources should be able to control those resources. And so that's a part of the ethos, I think, of this particular person who was a part of these community conversations, but it is definitely one that is aligned with how we at Black Youth Institute and Farm Alliance operates, and how we move in this work of establishing food sovereignty and food justice in the city. So we want to lift that up and say that that's the spirit at which, or upon which we will continue this conversation. So what did these conversations deem as important as coming from the people? Before I talk about the demands, I want to talk about the perspectives that came out of that. One, and I should say that these community conversations, all of them happen with a list of like 10 questions, each session had the same amount of questions, the same exact questions, and folks were able to answer those. And some of them were speaking to perspective. And what we learned is that people had a strong interest in urban agriculture in Baltimore City, either themselves and or in community or people in community through conversation. That people believe that access to arable land is not only necessary or important, but that's a human right, and that that land should be a common good, right? It should be of common use, a common asset, if you will, for the commons, and that it should that access to land would open opportunities for a multitude of community benefits, of course, including not only food provision, but also economic stimulation, public health improvements, and other such opportunities. And lastly, the last perspective that came out of it is out of those community conversations is that city government should be accountable for protecting community land. And the reason I want to give a little bit of context, because if you're from Baltimore, lived in Baltimore, watched TV, or just done anything other than being under a rock, you know that in our city and in other cities, sometimes land is being held for the purpose of of holding it for developments, new developments, and never, at least in my tenure in doing this work in the city of Baltimore, have I seen a very real conversation happening about the possibility of seeing urban agriculture as green development, right? Urban agriculture has largely been seen as a temporary use for unoccupied or so-called vacant land, and largely as placeholders for developers to come and build affordable housing or other things that government and other authorities are suggesting and deeming as more important than urban agriculture in those spaces. And so that's where that perspective comes from. And again, this is unapologetically the approach that we take in this and what we are committed to. So beyond our perspectives, here are the three top level demands: that Baltimore City owned land should be given permanently to communities for free and or sold to communities at a greatly discounted rate. That's number one. Number two, that we should build a legal and policy structure and frameworks to support and protect community land control from predatory capitalism, including development or some other policy tool like eminent domain. There are people in Poplarton right now dealing with the impacts of the political tool of eminent domain that has been used, has been weaponized, and that could be something that we talk about later. And it happens across the board. It's happened to some of our comrades doing farming, and land has been taken. So we believe that it needs to be, land needs to be, well, we need to support the concept, and land needs to be protected. And third, the last demand is that we need to establish flexible guidelines that are not a one size fit all, that considers how different communities actually materialize community control based on their specific needs. All right, so I want to pause here and I'll turn it over to Maria to see if you feel like you want to add anything, and if not, see if there's like space to, there's some more slides, but here's the bulk of the conversation. These are the demands. Again, the specifics of those demands and some of the nuances will come out in the report tomorrow. So I hate to keep saying that, but I also like it a little bit, like just giving you a little bit. I want to, get you excited about reading it. But yeah, here are the three overarching demands, and want to get people's reflections, but want to see if Mario want to chime in and then facilitate that. We want to open that up right
now. Thank you, Eric. Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited and happy that all of you are with us tonight for this historic moment, and I have nothing to add. These demands are from the people, so let's keep it moving. This is wonderful.
Okay. We have a couple of slides, y'all, that talk about this, like some of the general ideas that support the demand, that, you know, this first demand about communities be given permanent land being given permanently to communities. We say that, you know, one of the themes that came out of the community conversations is that every neighborhood in the city must have access to at least 1 to 2 acres of arable land, and that renting and leasing is not a viable way to transfer land to communities. The transfer of land titles and deeds must be, or for properties, must be permanent and legally protected from later seizure or development. Actually, I'll stop here and see if folks have any reactions, questions, things to speak to briefly. And again, if there are folks who have not, if you can check your audio status, if you're not muted, please mute. And if you are interested in connecting, Maria, would you actually serve as kind of moderator for this piece? We'll go one by one just to kind of get people's thoughts. Or Maria, please chime in here because we didn't talk about this in detail. If you're feeling like just go through it and let's talk about it at the end, I'm down to do that too.
Thank you, Eric. It is true, we did not talk about it. I am happy to take people's comments and questions both in the chat box where you can type it, and if you wish to speak, in the reactions section along your bottom menu of options. Raise hand is an option, so you may raise your hand to speak. Eric, if you want to just take a couple of these, and there are a couple in the chat if you would like to read them.
Because I can't look at people and that at the same time, are you okay to verbalize those and then?
Sure. Sure. So in the chat, we have folks saying, thank you for raising up Poppleton. Thank you
for sure.
raising up Poppleton. We have yes, free land, double exclamation point. And that part, which popped up when we were talking about renting and leasing is not a viable way to transfer land to communities.
Yeah.
And
I just wanted to write this one.
go ahead, Rodette, Miss Rodette.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking out loud, but I'll tell you my thing. I think that this government should give this city, give the communities the land. They should give it to them. They're not going to do nothing with it. Let them give it to them. That's my thought.
Yes, ma'am. Good to hear you. Good to hear from you. Yeah,
You
and I mean, that was the sentiment across several conversations, people from different regions of the city, working in different sectors, living across different regions. That's why it bubbled up as a theme. Adopt-a-lot programs and other programs are nice. They're nice tokens. They're tokens. Tokens are, and this is me saying that, the large theme there is that it's not enough to lease land in order for us to have any modicum of, if it's going to be repertory, and if we're going to amplify in a real way and operate sovereignty, we're going to have to think about other things. And again, having that be our floor and not the ceiling is what's most important, I think, for this. And that's not just, I'm not going to lie, those are my sentiments too, personally, but that seemed to be largely the sentiments of people across the board who joined these community conversations. So yeah, give thanks.
Okay, Brother Eric, we have one raised hand and maybe then we can move on. Ms. Lanier, if you'd like to unmute yourself. I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Yeah, that was right. I just wanted to lift up that the 2 acres of land per neighborhood is such a legitimate, very physical ask that it's like, why can't you do this when you can make an easy comparison of all the land that's vacant and all the land that is unused? So I that really stuck out real hard. I think that's a great ask, because the first people will say, why would we give out free land? Because there's acres of land being not used or kept up, and so I thought that was a great point.
Please, MJ, yeah, I appreciate that. And again, that was one of those things that came up several times as a very quantitative metric, like what would it look like? And of course, we have to figure that piece out, but that's not for us to figure out. We're not the elected officials. We're the people who say, this is what we need and this is what we want. When we talk in a little bit about what we could potentially do. We'll talk a little more about land and in pragmatic terms, but I appreciate you lifting that up. I'm gonna go to the next demand and the supporting argument there, and then we'll, I'll open it up again. So the second demand being building legal and political frameworks and structures to support and protect community land control from predatory capitalism. The first one, legislative change that protect community control, that community control land that cannot change with newly elected administration. So thinking about having some kind of longevity and policy attached to our work, so that we're not pedaling backwards, because what we're looking to do is move towards sovereignty, which includes land security, water security, and things of that nature. But we need to not be on eggshells every time there's a new administration. So figuring that piece out, developing a coalition or a network of community actors, organizations, and so-called individuals or independent members of the community across city neighborhoods that work together to ensure land protection. So almost like the word is not coming to me, but a group that essentially are watchdogs that make sure that this is not happening, or making sure that that lands are being protected. And then lastly, city at large and DPW as a specific agency must make water, sanitation, and other services easily accessible and affordable. And this is what's going to help us, or these are some of the supporting positions on the demand to have legal and policy frameworks that protect land. Any feedback, thoughts, commentary? We'll take a few, and of course there'll be opportunity to talk more about this. But any thoughts? And I'll let you do that, Maria, as well.
Thank you. Okay, Brother Eric, we have a raised hand from Shelby Calm.
Hello, thank you all for pulling this together, first of all. Maria, I was wondering if you could talk about the work that you've been doing with stormwater, and if there's a way to incorporate protections for land by showing that value. I mean, obviously it should be multifaceted and there are so many myriad benefits beyond stormwater, but if there's any connection there, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. I think there's more to say about this outside of this particular land conversation, but and anyone who's here who's a member of the Farm Alliance of Baltimore is welcome to speak up. We are a membership organization. We do have, I believe it's now up to 24 urban farms and community gardens in our membership as of this year. And many of those farms and community gardens are concerned with containing stormwater and keeping it from running off into the Chesapeake Bay. And certainly we have been looking into what some of the legal benefits, what some of the legal ramifications are for that. And certainly also looking at how some of the farms could potentially band together and pool their resources, pool their efforts to get sort of a standardized rainwater catchment system at different farms. That's one idea that's come up. But that's definitely something I'm happy to talk more about offline and outside of this community control discussion.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking if there's a way to promote value and then security through that, could that lead to land security? And yeah, I mean, happy to brainstorm later. I'm just wondering if there's a link there.
Great, thanks for bringing that up. Eric, we have some additional in the chat material if you'd like me to share now.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Someone said restrictions for, there's a little bit of a conversation in the chat about how folks from New York City and DC are looking to buy land or space in Baltimore, and that there needs to be protections for the communities that exist here already. And that's definitely something we considered very strongly, and that the people who came to these conversations are very concerned about.
For sure, yeah, and I would add that, and we're not just thinking about people from other locales, but also considering the nature of transplants, people who come to Baltimore. And also, I said this earlier, but I want to be 100% clear. If Black Youth Institute is connected, I think that I'm pretty sure folks would guess that we are also prioritizing Black people and legacy residents of Baltimore City. To be clear about that, that doesn't mean that other people wouldn't benefit. You can't legislate for one group of people, but I ain't an elected official. So our hope is to center Black people, because again, we're not going to de-racialize a conversation about land reparations, which also makes it complicated because we want to think about indigenous peoples in this space as well, right? It's been the land before it was the city of Baltimore's, the state of Maryland's land as well, before colonialism, right? Because I mean, that's a part of this conversation as well, but it is complicated. But also, we're not just saying Willie McNilly, like, hey, Baltimoreans should have it. We need to define who we are prioritizing. And again, just being clear that these are demands, these are not policy recommendations. We're not politicians. What we are doing with this report and with this presentation tonight is starting a conversation. So Shelby, your insights and other people's insights in the chat, we want to think about what are policy packages that are going to get us to where we want to be, that meet our demands. And so any of those ideas, I think that those will be important, but being clear that we're not being shy about who we're talking about. Black people in this city have bore the brunt of food apartheid for decades, right? For a long time. And so I'm not going to be shy now. I won't cuss so bad, but I don't want to know who's on here and what version ears are here. But what I would say is, because we're bearing the brunt, people haven't been shy about moving forward inequitable policies and practices on Black people. So we're not going to be shy about who we're talking about when we're thinking about land reparations in our city. So I want to be clear about that. And I'm going to be quiet because I can go on.
Brother Eric, we have Nanika with a raised hand.
When I saw Chad at first, I was like, no, that ain't no Chad.
That's funny. So, hey, y'all. I came in a little bit late, but the part that I came in on that I wanted to just bring around is that I'm going to put a link in the chat to a policy package, for lack of a better term, that I have kind of been put together and socialized surrounding Black land rights and keeping those stopping the erosions of Black land rights. And one of the things that I was saying in the chat is that because I was on this mayor's transition committee, I was able to put into the committee report some suggestions about, or recommendations about, like reforming the adopt-a-lot program and making it equitable, and the side lot program as well. And those things, even though I don't think they'll necessarily work for farming per se, they will work for folks being able to extend their yard and do some gardening and maybe some sharing. So those things are definitely things that the folks in government are starting to hear about, and I intend to keep pushing them so they hear about them and they're in alignment with the demands here.
Yeah, of course you are. I appreciate that. So one thing to react to that, in a few slides from now, we'll talk about some of the perspective ways that we can begin to think about how to plug into or build on what people are already saying, including the mayor's transition report, which I'll reference in a little bit. And also, Nika, is good. Again, thank you. I think that whatever we have at our disposal, we should be thinking about, so that as we are developing out those policy possibilities, that we're considering everything. And for us, when I'm thinking about, and when we approach this, when thinking about urban agriculture, we're not just thinking farming, but we're talking gardening, we're talking about other things as well. We said fiber, flowers, food, and other materials. And so that's what we want to consider. And if anybody knows about the mission of Black Youth Institute, we know folks would know that urban agriculture is a portion of what we need to do to get to Black land and food sovereignty, not the end all be all, right? So we got to think about food aggregation and distribution, but food production is important as well, including other forms of growing and agricultural practices. So yeah, thank you, Nika. And we'll definitely be following up on that as we are moving into next steps. So thank you. You want to do one more, Mario, or you want to move forward?
Yes, we had one other person with a raised hand. I believe it was Miss Godsey. Godsey, yep. Mhm.
Janine is fine.
Janine, yeah, great.
I was just curious, like with all the gentrification that's happening and people losing their homes as a result of like property tax as well, like how can you interrupt that in order to ensure that, yes, once the demands are met, because I'm speaking it into existence, but once that happens, doesn't it kind of not mean anything if people still actually lose the property that they occupy within the city? So I guess I'm just wondering how to interrupt like the stealing of the property now and people losing their homes as a result of property taxes and other things, in order to make sure that when the land gets into the people's hands that it stays there.
Sure. Yeah, I think, well, there's several things that we've thought about, and I don't think that we have the answer. That's why, I mean, Janine, you know what I mean, you already know we go back like you know what I'm saying, like hula hoops, hoop earrings, and rope chains. So we'll continue to build, build together. But I think I imagine knowing Nika, it's in the package that she talked about just now. But I don't know. I mean, we have some thoughts, but I think they're too many to name and insufficient enough to spend the time doing that here. But I do think that I think you raise a really good and important point, and I think that that's just more reason for you to stay connected to the next steps of this, which I know you will anyways. Yeah. I appreciate that. And of course, there'll be opportunity to talk more through this. I want to get through to the supporting arguments for the last demand real quick. And so the last demand, as a reminder, is establishing flexible guidelines for how communities actually materialize this control that comes, and that's flexible from community or from neighborhood to neighborhood. The first supporting argument is that, or position is, not all communities will be interested, in using, repatriated land for agriculture. We must recognize other ideas like parks, green spaces, affordable housing, and other things. Because again, I don't know, for me, I love that this was a theme from the people. In fact, I gave minimal input in this, but I think that it's important to name this last point that I should have highlighted in red. Community desires and needs should be put first. I think that that's really important while urban agriculture is the primary thrust here. I think what is important is the larger concept of sovereignty. And as I talk about sovereignty in any platform, I like to liken it to this thing that people talk about or have been talking about for decades, the so-called American dream. But when we think about the American dream, I think it comes down to sovereignty, being able to decide for yourself or have self-determination around what is available, what you want available, or at least have enough power to change it if you don't like it. That's not the truth for Black communities, for brown communities, and poor communities. And so we want to be able to want it to be flexible enough so that communities are able to, what's most important is securing the land, and the land use is being aligned with not only larger movement, but what neighbors want, and figuring out a way to do that. The second point is that it may take some communities time to develop interests or plans for space. So we need to reject profit and time-based measurements of success, which I think is important, indicative of what the other demand talked about, and that is just kind of predatory, not just predatory approaches, but ethos as well, right? And thinking about centering stewardship over, again, profit and time-based measurements, and really looking at going deep specifically into getting communities to a place where folks understand this, which I think a strong political education piece has to be a part of this as we talk about it. But that's not a policy consideration. That is what we need to do on the ground as we're continuing to build this network of folks. Third point, policy should be be flexible enough to accommodate multiple land control styles. And so, for example, thinking about various ways of So some people might want to own the land independently. Some people might want to put the land in trust. They might be need to, put in trust and have other types of arrangements or, leases. Some people don't want to own land. Some people want to lease. But do we have a, year-to-year lease, or if we're asking for the land to be deeded over? In some cases, just having these the possibility of multiple ways of accessing the land. And then lastly, policy should be sensitive in identifying and prioritizing those communities with the greatest needs for the opportunities of communal land access. So I say that to that point, I think that it's self-explanatory, but to that point, we're talking about prioritizing poor communities, prioritizing Black communities, and ensuring that it's not like, well, any neighborhood can decide what they want to do. We don't want to prioritize the the Mount Washingtons and the Fed Hills of the world. We want to prioritize those who who could benefit and need to benefit, because again, these are the places where people experience food apartheid, and which are largely Black and brown and poor communities. I'll stop here and see if any reactions, thoughts, commentary as well.
Brother Eric, we have a raised hand from Ms. Kioba Strong. Ms. Strong, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself? Okay, while she's doing that, I can go ahead and share what's going on in the chat. Okay, good. So there's some discussion of, has anyone heard of Bliss Meadows? An excellent, if you don't mind, I can give a plug for Bliss and Essence. You're absolutely right. They're an amazing project. Backyard Base Camp, or Bliss Meadows, they're called. This is a farm, Black woman-owned farm in Northeast Baltimore, I believe in Frankfurt. They are operating on 10 acres of private land and city-owned land. It's a combination. And they're just building an amazing farm and pollinator habitat and wilderness for folks to come and take in nature, and for the community to come and experience the wilderness right here in the city. And they are amazing. They are also a member of the Farm Alliance. So yes, and what I would add to that is simply all of the farms and gardens within the Farm Alliance of Baltimore. I think we have a number of them. I believe we're up to, I don't want to get this number wrong, but about 40% of our membership are Black-led farms and gardens, and they could be considered proof of concept for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And also, I would just share really quickly that to that point, I think it's there's also precedent throughout the country. In fact, somebody mentioned DC. DC has some policy legislation that we need to do some digging into this to support urban agriculture. And then again, in a couple of slides, we'll even talking about some policy that we can build off of right now that we believe we can as well. But that is a real life example of what it could look like with community control of that land and how it's in benefit, and what Sister Atia and the staff and community around Backyard Base Camp is what they're doing. And you're talking about an example. I mean, that's an example. There's no precedent. There absolutely is precedent in the city. So the question is, how do we scale that? And how do we allow entry for other communities as well?
Exactly. We have a question from Mr. Rodney North. Like cooperatives, would cooperatives be an example of what you are talking about in this slide?
Sure, yeah, that's another option. Cooperatives as another way to, when we talk about land control styles or what have you, cooperatives are another example. I neglected to mention that. Yes, thank you.
Great. And then one last point from Tanira. How does education play into this? curriculum development for schools, families who wish to learn about urban agriculture, and stewardship workshops, job training for maintenance of properties, etc.
Yep, you said it, all that. I think that, yeah, you know, again, another reason why I think that you, and I know you can't tell, but I'm looking at you. I think you should stay connected. You know what I'm saying? I think that anybody who has ideas that should be considered in all of this, we should do that. And we are intentionally, we're not bringing people together to show our pretty presentation. We're bringing folks together to see who's about it. At least for me, and I imagine that Maria feels the same way, but I don't want to speak for Maria. We are in a position where we're thinking about who can, and while I'm being clear and want to be transparent on the front end, I want to center Black people. If you can't stomach that, then after this you can say, damn, that presentation was nice and I liked it. Cool, keep it going, have a nice day. If you think that, you know, your liberation is tied with ours, then we're gonna keep building because there's work to be done. Releasing a report is only the beginning. Having a public meeting like this is only the beginning. Seeing beautiful smiling faces and people shaking their head is only the beginning. We got work to do, but I'm gonna tell you that in the next slide. On this slide, we're gonna maybe take one more question.
Okay, we have a raised hand from Curtis. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yes. Brother Eric.
My brother.
This is an awesome presentation. And just to talk about some of the bullet points you got on here first. So it happened a lot in Poppleton right now with the land sovereignty, and you spoke about what type of actions potentially could communities also almost like leverage could they have in order to ensure that they have a voice at the seat for development. And I think it'd be good to explore the change or amendments to the urban renewal planning. So like Southwest Baltimore is going through it. I think Cherry Hill is going through urban renewal planning phase. But the neighborhoods don't, so that their information is being heard, so that their information is being accepted, and that the city is being transparent with what their plans are, because they always have like this 20, 50-year plan, and they go according to plan for 50 years. And then when it comes into play for the community members to do their input phase in the 50-year plan, they have maybe 2 or 3 years of preparation, and then they got 10 years to be a part of the input feedback thing. And then development continues. So it's like, how do we potentially look at that urban renewal plan and change that dynamic that it starts at the community level first, and the plan that the community presents is what's to be accepted and taken in. I know the Southwest Partnership, they presented a vision plan, the City of Baltimore accepted it, and now anybody who wanted to do development in this area is sent to the Southwest Partnership. But that's not the neighborhood association, nor is that the resident. So like, how do just because that is an opportunity, the urban renewal plan and addressing it. But great points, great slide, great demands.
I appreciate it. And I think to my reaction to that, I think 100%. And I think that is another example of what it looks like to wield community control or community power, right? And I think we could say that if you did an inventory from neighborhood to neighborhood or neighborhood association to neighborhood association, you'll see different levels of power, different levels of organization. I think that all these types of conversations have to be a part of what we consider as policy recommendations, but more importantly, some of these things we ain't got to talk to elected officials about. That's the work that we got to do, right? And I think that you're right. These present opportunities, what Southwest Partnership is doing, and what the precedent that we have, we just got to build on it. And I think that this creates opportunities, and it creates momentum, I believe, for us to utilize urban renewal processes and or other planning processes as a way to push these things. And that's what I actually want to do on this the next couple of slides. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's questions and inquiries. I want to speak to this thing. Speak to another quote that came out of the community conversation, direct quote from one of the participants. This person, who may or may not be on this call, said, Baltimore does this thing that I've coined civic sharecropping. It asks or cajoles or demands Black and brown communities to do things that the city should be doing with our tax dollars. Folks should be getting paid for their time and their ingenuity. And I think that this is a great term that's coined and all of that. It was Nika. I don't mean we did it like this in the report to try to protect you, but I'm gonna give you all the credit right here because I think that that's important and it's important to raise up as a major issue. And kind of the way that Maria has been talking about it, this is what we're doing with this process. Policy should come through this direction. Should come from the people, right? Folks have been elected to make these types of to talk to constituents, to have those constituents shape policies. That's not typically what happens. And so what we've done is go through months of connecting with folks to find out what they are. And now here we go. We have the demand. And so this is an opportunity for us to push against that and to pressure folks to do what we need them to do. So then what? What are the opportunities we have and where to from here, or some thoughts on where we go from here? There have been over the last 3 years, 3 consecutive years, policy considerations and consideration through the legislature that we can build upon. The 2019 Baltimore Sustainability Plan, hearing and associated policy coming from the Victory Gardens hearing in 2020. And in 2021, I have these for references, but in 2021, Mayor Brandon Scott released the transition report that Sister Nika talked about earlier, that we talked about briefly, that has many actual physical words that speak to reparations councils, even going so far as to talk about food sovereignty. And so I think that this transition report isn't the same thing as policy. There are recommendations for 100 days, the first 100 days, the first year, and the first term, that in several of the sections have implications on not only community control of land, but also implications for larger food, Black land and food sovereignty organizing work, that if you haven't read this document, that I think that you should spend some time in this document looking at the Baltimore Sustainability Plan and looking into the public records around the Victory Gardens. There is the point that I'm making in these 2 slides is that there is precedent, right? And there is at least on paper the political will. Now our job is to ask, to demand, to push, to work, to organize ourselves so that we're able to do that. And I won't borrow from Baba Marcus Garvey. He said, go to work in the morn of a new creation until you have reached the height of self-progress. And from that pinnacle, bestow upon the world a civilization of your own. You know, some people may like, well, what is that talking about? My understanding of this quote, and as I go into the next phase of this and talking about organizing, is go into creating the Baltimore that we want to see, not one that's given to us, not one that we sit back and decide that, okay, well, I guess that'll do, not one that we are complicit with practices and policies and behaviors that are not consistent with who we are as tax-paying members, as people in a so-called, free world and free society. We want to see a Baltimore where the people are centered, or at least let me say this. I want to see a Baltimore where the people are at the center, not market forces, not corporations, but I want to see not only a city, but also a food system and all of our food environments where people can thrive in the ways that we decide that we want to. So it's going to take some work. It's going to take some work. It's going to take us getting some work done. It's going to take us thinking about, in the same way that we're pushing this, this is our floor, not our ceiling. Reparations is what we should have, right? Like, that's not the thing that is like, okay, well, I guess we'll take those things, or I guess we'll take pretty 175-page reports that don't say anything. Now is the time for us. The time for us to decide what we want, and we already did that with our demands, but figuring out what does that mean and creating policies and practices. And policies, again, I want to be clear for those who may or may not conflate these words. When I talk about policy, I'm not just talking about legislation, but I'm talking about capital and dollars. I'm talking about technical assistance. I'm talking about all the things that are included in the political process that we have at our disposal. And my thought, and this is just me here, the rest of it was the report. This is me. I ain't even gonna say it in front. What I'd like to see is Black land and food sovereignty, and urban agriculture and community control of land, and land reparations for the people, for the purpose of moving toward Black land and food sovereignty. It may not mean the same for everybody, and that's fine. But what does sovereignty mean in Baltimore City in the urban context, right? Because for me, conceptually, sovereignty means control, right? Self-determination, being able to control, in this case, how we are in relationship with land and what kind of relationships we have to food and what food do we want available, and how we are benefiting politically, economically, and socially from that food that is available, and the use of the land in our communities. But I think, for me, I think beyond the concept, we have to think pragmatically about what does this mean? What does sovereignty mean for us? And I just want to raise something up really quickly before I give some thoughts on tactics that we can utilize. So in Baltimore City, we use this figure essentially that it takes about 1 acre of land to feed 100% of the food for one person. And by food, I mean like fruits and vegetables, and maybe if folks eat eggs or what have you, but I'm not thinking about, ton of meat or anything. We use that number and we say that the city of Baltimore has about 602,000 people, then we need 602,000 acres. We're not going to, well, I'm going to get to the conclusion. If we were providing 50% of the food for 100% of the citizens of Baltimore, then we would need the 301 acres of land. And if we were providing 25%, it would be this amount of acres that we need. And if just 10% of the food for all of the people, this is what we need. And if we said, you know what, well, we're not gonna worry about everybody, we're gonna think about Black people. If we wanted to feed all, using this point, we wanted to feed all the Black people in Baltimore City, this is how many acres we had that we would need to do that. So I question, what is sovereignty? Really, right? What is sovereignty? What does it actually mean to control the food that we have? And I'm going to have this as a rhetorical question because I want to get through to our dialogue. But this is how many acres are across Baltimore, not unoccupied or vacant land. This is the acres total. Even if we were to wipe everybody out and just turn it into a farm city, we're not going to support the numbers of people here. My point is, we have an operational conundrum. It doesn't mean complete control. It means that we have to be able to decide. We have to be determiners. We have to be folks who decide what we want and to be able to move toward that. And we may not be able to provide all the food for all of our family members and for all of our comrades and all of the citizens of Baltimore and all of us on the call. But what we do have is examples like in Cuba, where folks have moved toward urban agriculture and various agricultural practices to figure out how to do the most with the land that we have. But if we have unoccupied land in our community that's not being utilized, and that we do not utilize our power to actually demand what happens with it, nothing's gonna happen. So I'm gonna borrow from what Baba Kwame Ture says, is organize. What can we do right now? In general, I think that we can do some of these things. We can continue to hear ideas that folks talked about and build an action network of sorts that work solely on moving toward community control of land. We can demonstrate whatever we have at our disposal, any of these things. Develop new community land trusts, develop an inventory of land available from the city. There are several things that we can do overall. And then immediately we can stay connected. Connect to social media, we'll follow up with this email, read the full report. Black folks join BYI's, or the action network that BYI is anchoring. If you're a farmer, join Farm Alliance. These are immediate things that we can do, but most importantly, y'all, it's gonna require some work if we're gonna materialize community control of land reparations in our city. It's gonna take some work. We got work to do. So for me, at this point, I wanna close out by saying, again, to reiterate that this is our floor, y'all. We deserve this, not by virtue of us paying taxes and building homes and building lives in this city, and not just by virtue of electing people who are looking at the best interests of people, and the people have spoken and said what we want, but because it is our human right to be able to decide for ourselves what we want. And because Black and brown and poor people are the people who are bearing the brunt of food apartheid, we should be the ones deciding how this thing happens. And that's not everybody on this call. There's some people who don't identify in that way, but we need all of us to figure out how we can make that happen. And this is the step toward it. We make aware to those who will listen, including you all who have brilliant ideas and great questions, and those who are willing to listen, and those who we make listen, that now is the time for land reparations in Baltimore City, not tomorrow. Now is the time to show that we are a model city. Now is the time to show that we're not playing any more games. Now is the time to show that we could actually erect, materialize, and contribute to sovereignty and community control of land in our city. I'll be quiet there. Thank y'all. Open at this point for further commentary, thoughts, pushbacks, and other things. And I'll turn it to you, Mario. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Eric. I just want to hold a second of space for your closing because I think that was very powerful. We have Melanie Thomas with a raised hand. Go ahead, Melanie. Hope I'm saying your name right.
Yes, you are. Good evening, everyone. Really great presentation. I'm really excited about all of this. And what I just wanted to say really quickly is like this plan for reparations and reclaiming land and everything, it really goes along with the plan that we all talked about. So I want to continue the conversation and figure out, and when I say that the plan that we talked about, the plan that the city has adopted, where there's a section in there about reclaiming communities, where it talks about the disproportionate impacts in Black and brown communities and a plan to address all of that. But as Eric said, like we have to, it starts now. Like we have to continue to put in the work to be able to create the change that we want to see. And so I'm just really excited about what's to come, and I hope to continue to be involved in this conversation and the work that needs to be done for us to really see the change that we want to see throughout our city.
Sure, give thanks. We're gonna keep it moving, y'all. We're gonna push it. No question. We're gonna do it. Appreciate you.
Okay, and our final question in the chat as we're wrapping up here is, how do we support the organizers who are taking this on if we don't have the capacity to organize directly? That's an amazing question. First, I would suggest to keep up with the work as it's happening. So our newsletters are both free. Eric's newsletter is The Yield. It comes out of Black Yield Institute. And if you registered for this event, I think we should be able to send another message, right, Eric, after this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll send a link to sign up for both Black Yield Institute and Farm Alliance of Baltimore's newsletters, so you can keep up with this work, because even though you may not think of yourself as an organizer now, there may be something down the line where you say to yourself, oh, that's an easy task for me. That matches my skill set exactly. I'm just going to participate in that way. And additionally, please tune into this conversation. As Eric just mentioned, we are about to escalate this conversation to local city government in Baltimore. So please tune in when you start to hear things about this issue from members of city council and the mayor's office. It would be wonderful if you could participate, exercise your vote and your civic muscles and participate. We also have a suggestion from farmer Maisha Taylor for folks trying to roll up their sleeves and become familiar with the land. She has generously shared a link in the chat. Please, everyone, take a look at the chat. Black Yield also has a podcast, which is an awesome way to tune in if you're more interested in the political frameworks of these conversations, where Eric and his staff develop a political education discussion in the podcast. What else, Eric? What else do we want to say to people?
I know that you want to share with folks about things that are happening. I think that that's important.
Yes.
For us to look up. Yeah.
Perfect. So yes, and for those who are interested in actually folks who are interested in actually starting their own farms or learning to farm, the Farm Alliance of Baltimore, I'm pleased to announce, is about to, beginning this spring, late spring and early summer, we will be launching a farmer pipeline program. And this will be primarily for Black farmers from Baltimore City. If you are interested in stepping forward and learning this trade and this amazing art and craft of working the land, we will have that opportunity for you. So please definitely keep in touch with us. Let me know if that's something that interests you, and we will take your name down and follow up with you.
Yeah, and I would just say to Maria's point, I mean, this has been a work, this idea of, well, what can we contribute to legitimize, to use that language, and to create urban agriculture as a viable means of or a viable industry in our city. And we can't do that without policies that support that happening. We could train all the farmers all day long, and then folks are gonna move other places to actually utilize their skills and or start farms in other places if we don't have the power necessary to move us in the direction to see our city have a new industry for people. Everybody's not going to college. Everybody's not going to some other trade, like, some people want to farm. And in fact, quick plug, what Maria is talking about is the materialization of a report that they published, that Farm Alliance published about a year ago now. Believe it or not, the people who told us that they want to farm. These were young people from Benjamin Franklin. These were returning citizens. These were folks who were saying, like, yo, if there was an opportunity to learn how to farm and land to actually do it, we would do it. We can't do that without the policies necessary to do so. And so for at least from our standpoint, we're not doing this to like ruffle feathers and be cute and be like, yo, we can say the most radical stuff. Like, nah, we in this. We want, like, we need to be able to make this happen because we can't wait for nobody else to feed us. So we have to do as much as we can tactically to make sure that we get there, y'all. And I mean, part of that is pushing policy. Part of that is preparing young people. Part of that is erecting new, land trusts to protect land, right? Part of that is if you got skills as a lawyer, if you're a farmer, if you're an organizer, if you're a developer, whoever you are, I think that there's room for us to consider how we work together. And I might not have said, your occupation of choice or how you, make your bread and butter, but you too. That's what this work is about. It's not, I want to be clear about that as well. It really felt important for me to say that, because yes, we are releasing the report tomorrow, but we're not researchers. We ain't trying to be cute. This is literally to start and continue conversations that we know will move into action. So I just wanted to say that as my final thing, unless folks have other commentary or thoughts. I'll, share it with, send it over to you, Martin.
Okay. I think we'll leave it there. There is tons of commentary in the chat. And so I encourage everyone, I'll leave it up there for another couple moments if folks want to go and take a look. There's links in there, resources. Definitely, as Nanika says, please make sure that yourself, your fam, and your neighbors have paid their property tax bill below $750 by April 30th. And that is a critical piece for holding on to the property that folks do have. Okay, beyond that, It's great to see everyone and just so energized by this space. Thanks so much.
Great job, you guys. It's Stacy.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Peace, everybody. Appreciate everybody.
Oh, hey, Mike. Hi, Eric. It's Stacy.
Peace. Where you at? I don't see you.
Oh, I don't have my
got you.
camera on because I'm laying in bed.
It's all good, but I see.
I am so exhausted. So yeah, but good job though. It was great.
Thanks. Bobby Jamila. Hey, I called you. Happy belated birthday.
I know you did. I forgot myself. So did you know I had a hard time getting in? I had to go by Jordan to get into this meeting. I came in late. Yeah, but it's gonna be recorded, so I'll catch what I miss.
Now I get a chance to see everybody on here. What's up, family? Sean, Arthur, Nikki.